The title of this book, the title of this book is The Spiritual Man. It is written by our beloved brother, Watchman Nee. We are in great part 5 of this book, chapter 3 of this great part 5. The title of chapter 3 is Conscience. Chapter 3, subpart 8. Chapter 3, subpart 8. A weak conscience. A weak conscience. A few moments ago, we remarked that the standard of our holy living is Christ, not conscience. Third, the latter connectless is of great significance. It testifies whether or not in our everyday life we have pleased God. It consequently serves as a criterion for the current degree of holiness. If we live by what conscience teach, we have arrived at the place we should be for the present moment. It is therefore prime factor in our daily work after the Spirit. In whatever matter we disobey the dictate of our conscience, we shall be reprimanded by it. As a result, we shall lose peace and shall be cut off temporarily, temporarily from having fellowship with God. In whatever matter we disobey the dictate of our conscience, we shall be reprimanded by it. As a result, we shall lose peace and shall be cut off temporarily from having fellowship with God. There is no question that we must follow what conscience demands, but how perfect its demand is remained a question. As we have seen, conscience is limited by knowledge. It can guide only by the knowledge it possesses. It condemns every disobedience to what it knew, but it cannot condemn what it uses. It cannot condemn what it itself does not know. Hence, a vast distance obtained between the measure of conscience and the measure of God's holiness. Just here, we find at least two defects. First, a conscience with limited knowledge condemns only what it knew as wrong and leave untouched in our life numerous matters which are not according to God's will. God and those more mature saints knew how imperfect we are, and yet we continue to walk in our old fashion for lack of new light. Is not this an enormous defect? This imperfection is nonetheless bearable because God does not judge what we do. Not new. Despite this flaw, we can fellowship with Him and be accepted if we simply obey whatever our conscience dictates. But the second defect, unlike the first, does interfere with our fellowship with God, just as a limited knowledge fails to judge what ought to be judged, so it may also judge what should not be judged. Does it mean that conscience is faulty in its guidance? No. The leading of conscience is correct and must be heeded by believers, but there are different degrees of knowledge among the saints. Many things which can be done with knowledge are condemned as sins by the conscience of those who lack knowledge. This manifests the diseases of believers' immaturity. The Father can do many things with perfect liberty, for they have advanced knowledge. experience, and position, but for the little children to do them will be entirely wrong because they simply do not possess such knowledge, experience, and position. This does not imply that there are two different standards of the Christian conduct. It just shows, however, that the standard of good and evil is bound up with individual position. This law applies to the secular as well as to the spiritual, realm. Many matters agree perfectly with God's will when done by a mature believer, but these very items become sins if copied by immature ones. The reason for this variance is the different degree of knowledge in our conscience. When one believer does what his conscience deems good, he is obeying the will of God. But the conscience of another person may judge the same things as evil, and he will be sinning against God if he does it. The absolute will of God is always the same, but He reveals His mind to each person according to the limitation of their spiritual position. Those with knowledge have a stronger conscience and consequently enjoy more liberty, while those without knowledge harbor a weaker conscience and hence experience more bondage. This is distantly illustrated in the first letter of the Corinthians. There was much misunderstanding amongst the Christians at Corinth concerning the eating of food offered to idols. Some of them regarded idol as possessing no real existence, since there is no God but one, in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 4. So for them, there could no difference between the food offered to idol and food not so offered, but with property could be eaten. But others, having long been accustomed to idol, could not help viewing the food as thought it were truly offered to an idol. They felt uneasy when eating it, because their conscience was weak. While eating the food, they were defiled, in verse 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 8. The apostle treated this divergence of view as a matter of knowledge. The former had light and therefore did not sin when they ate, for their conscience did not bother them. The latter, however, not enjoying such knowledge, fell uneasy while eating and so were guilty. Thus, we see the great importance of knowledge. The increase of it sometimes may increase the condemnation of conscience, but it may equally decrease its condemnation. It is advisable for us to beseech the Lord to grant us more knowledge in order that we may not be bound unreasonably, but this knowledge must be kept in humility, lest we, like the Christian, fall into the flesh. In case our knowledge is inadequate and our conscience continue its censure, we must obey its voice at all cost. We should never philosophize that since this thing is not wrong according to God's highest standard, we can do it in spite of what our conscience says. Let us not forget that conscience is our current standard of God's leading. We need to submit to it, else we sin. God judge whatever conscience judge. What we have discussed here concerning merely outward items such as food, in those items of a more spiritual character, there can be no such difference of liberty and bondage, however much our conscience grow. Only in this external physical matter does God deal with us according to our age. In the young believer, he pays much attention to their food, clothing, and other external issues because he desired to put to death the evil deeds of the body. If the young genuinely have a heart to follow the Lord, they shall find him frequently calling them through their spirit conscience to subdue themselves in these matters. But those with deeper experience in the Lord seem to enjoy more liberty in their conscience with respect to this item because they already have learned how to obey him. Yet the more advanced ones are confronted by one of the most serious hazards here. Their conscience become so strong as to breathe into cold, numbness. Young Christians who follow the Lord wholeheartedly obey him at many points, for their conscience is sensitive and easily moved by the Holy Spirit. All believers, on the other hand, have so much knowledge that they tend to overdevelop their mind so as to numb the sensitivity of the conscience. They are tempted to do things according to the knowledge of their mind and seemingly render themselves immovable by the Holy Spirit. This is a fatal blow to spiritual life. It removes the freshness from a believer's walk and causes it to become old and dull. Regardless how much knowledge we possess, let us be careful not to follow it but the conscience of our spirit. Should we disregard what is condemned intuitively by our conscience and take our knowledge as our standard of conduct? We have already settled into walking after the flesh. It is not true that our conscience sometime can be greatly disturbed when we see out to do what is absolutely legitimate according to the truth we knew. That which conscience condemns is reckoned as not in accordance with God's will, even taught by the knowledge of our mind it is good. This is because our knowledge is acquired through the searching of our intellect and not by revelation in our intuition. Hence, the leading of conscience and of knowledge can prove to be quite conflicting. Paul indicates that one's spiritual life shall be impaired enormously if he disregards the reproach of conscience and follow the knowledge of his mind instead. For if anyone sees you, a man of knowledge, at table in an idol's temple, may he not be encouraged, if his conscience is weak, to eat food offered to idol? And so, by your knowledge, this weak man is destroyed. And so, by your knowledge, this weak man is destroyed. The brother for whom Christ died. The brother for whom Christ died. In 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 10 to 11. Seeing a believer with knowledge eating food offered to idol, the one without knowledge tends to think he too can so eat. But if the latter eat against the voice of his conscience, he fell into sin. Let us never for a moment then walk by the knowledge we have. However, most of it However, much of it we have accumulated without only to heed the intuition and conscience of the Spirit. Perhaps one's knowledge may influence his conscience. Even so, what he must follow directly is his conscience. God is looking more for our obedience to his will than for the correctness of our conduct.